Hi, everybody. I'm Jocelyn. So Locke did a good idea already characterizing how long you guys have been managing. So let's tap dance for a second. I'd love to know what size company, what's the context you're managing in. So how many of you are working for a small company? Let's say 50 people or fewer in your company. Okay, a good number. And how many in that kind of medium 50 to 300 size range? Okay, good. 300 to 1,000? More than 1,000. More than 10,000. You work for Google. Okay, that's really helpful. So it's a broad mix. I'm going to talk about a lot of things. Some of them you're more empowered in a smaller organization. Some of them you have more options in a larger organization. So hopefully this will be relevant to everybody. Let me quickly introduce myself. I studied computer science at Stanford in the late 90s. Went into sort of one of these .com type companies that really only hired new grads. So there wasn't much of what you could call adult supervision. My becoming a manager story was very much the battlefield promotion, which is once I was 2 years out of college, I was the gray hair, and so I was quickly managing other people, and I was sort of absolutely committed to figuring out how to do a good job of that. I had a book club and a standing argument with a peer who was in the same situation as me. But after that experience, and then working at my own startup, which was sort of life and death to get those management decisions right, I joined VMware when it was about 300 people, and before I joined, sort of engineering was pretty flat, reporting into 2 directors, and I joined as part of sort of the first wave of, okay, we're going to have teams and managers now. And so I really got to create what it meant to be a manager at VMware, and then VMware, from 2003 onwards, doubled headcount and revenue every year for the next 5 years in a row. So my career did this, and as quickly as I figured out how to be a manager, I had to figure out how to be a director. As soon as I'd gotten director figured out, I had to figure out senior director, then VP, then general manager of a business unit, which involves managing people who are not engineers, which, if you think engineers are casts of characters, the more functions you include, the more crazy, beautiful snowflakes you encounter. In 2010, I left VMware. It had become pretty enormous, and joined Facebook and spent 4 years there, again, kind of being the gray hair at Facebook, and thinking very long and hard about how to instill a great management discipline at that company. I left Facebook 2 years ago, and I've been full-time angel investing since then, so I actually have not been managing for the last 2 years, other than myself. I like managing myself. I'm a good employee and a good boss. Not such a good admin, no, I'm a terrible admin. All right, so let's launch into the gist of the talk, which is how to develop your team. So let's just get some shout-outs from the audience. What does career development mean to you? More money, okay. It's honest. What else?
Skill progression.
Skill progression, good. Yeah, what else?
More responsibility.
More influence? What was over here?
More responsibility.
More responsibility. Yeah, I like all these answers. So this is pretty similar. And so what I want to concentrate on in this talk today is actual personal growth. More ability and more skills, more responsibility, more impact. When someone on your team goes from here to here, they're going to have a larger impact on your team's mission on what you're supposed to be doing. But it's kind of the elephant in the room, because when people grow, they do expect more money, more status, more authority, more access. And these things can kind of get tangled up in an unpleasant way, and I don't have time. If I want to make this talk really actionable, I don't want to sort of go on a lot of long detours sort of untangling those. And so all I kind of want to say is, for the purpose of this talk, what I want to talk about is how to actually help people grow, and not how to help people achieve more status or more authority. All right, so now there is a third thing, actually. None of you mentioned it. I think it's interesting, but what about recognition? It's neither growth and skills, nor is it sort of status and authority. Which bucket does it belong in? I don't put it in sort of the status and authority, like, I'm not sure about those things. Those don't seem like the right motivations. That's mercenary, not missionary, right? But recognition, I think it's important to recognize it isn't growth, and it is not the end in itself. We grow for the sake of having more impact, more responsibility, more capability. And we're growing our employees for that purpose, not for the sake of making them feel recognized. But recognition is an important reward, and Lop actually talked about this in the last talk, that sort of giving people compliments is one of sort of the best, is a superpower as a manager, is praising people. And I think that recognition kind of goes hand in hand with that, because if it feels great to get praised or complimented by your manager, it feels even more great for sort of other people to hear you be praised. And so I think it's a tool in your management toolkit to reward people and to give them a positive incentive in a certain direction. I do want to give actually a quick sidebar on compliments, just because it did come up in the last talk, which is this. I'm sure that you're managing engineers, and so most of the people you're managing are men, but probably you're managing a few women. When my manager compliments me on my clothing or my hair or my smile, it triggers this little fight or flight reaction in my brain because we have this sort of like many decades history of valuing women for their appearance and not their competence. So my advice to you would be like, yes, if somebody's worked hard on their outfit, like you don't have to refrain from complimenting it, but like your compliments should be about the substance of people's work. It should be about their competence, not their appearance, especially if they're women. All right. One last thing about recognition is that in some cases, it is a requisite precondition for future growth, which is, not obvious, and I will explain more about what I mean by that. All right. So why do you regret? First of all, do all of you want to grow your employees? Does anybody not want to grow their employees? So maybe I don't have to motivate you very hard. How many of you feel like you're doing a good job of developing your employees' careers? How many of you would like help doing more? Okay, I'm in the right place. All right, so I won't spend too long on this slide. I think people should become managers if they find it intrinsically satisfying to help people grow, and so it's actually one of the more fun parts of your job. It's certainly a social contract between you and the employee. One of the profound reasons people quit and leave their jobs or just sort of work less hard at them is because they feel like they're stagnating. And last but not least, as a manager, your job, your actual one job, is to make your team really productive. You know that hiring is your job, that expands the bandwidth and capacity of your team. Well, growing the individual employees is just as much a job. Okay. All right, so let's talk about like what actually does help people grow. How do people grow? And there's sort of like a kind of a naive model of knowledge or ability, which is, if the blue stuff is stuff you know how to do, like time passes in the x-axis, and by osmosis, we learn more stuff every day, and we just get this nice linear upward ramp, and then we have the stuff in blue that we know how to do, and the stuff in black that actually we don't know how to do. And what I want to say is it's not that easy. We don't actually learn and grow by osmosis in most situations. And in fact, if I can refer to this sort of blue zone as, if I'm living in the blue zone, if I'm doing stuff I already know how to do, let's call that the comfort zone. And that black zone, that I don't know how to do this stuff, that's my stress zone. And here's the thing, if I just live in my comfort zone and I'm doing stuff I already know how to do, I won't grow. I will be stagnant. But likewise, if I'm in my stress zone, if you hand me something that I have absolutely no idea how to do, nothing to build on, no way to get started, if you hand me a Sanskrit manuscript and tell me to translate it, I will also learn nothing from that experience. And it will be a very desperate and uncomfortable one. So neither of those is a good strategy for growth. The way you grow is you find this kind of staircase, sort of running in between, riding that line between your stress zone and your comfort zone. You do stuff. And so in this staircase, the risers, the sort of moving up from the blue into the black, that's doing stuff. That's taking a project where you know how to do some elements of it, you can make an educated guess about other elements, but you actually, a lot of it is outside what you've done before, and you do stuff. And then the flat part of the stair that you step on, the step, not the riser, that's learning from. That's the feedback loops where you incorporate, you digest, you see what happened when you took your guess, and you react to it and you pivot, and then you take another step up and another step over. All right, so that staircase of doing stuff and learning from it is how people grow. And your job as a manager is to help people find the next step. So let's talk about what doing stuff actually is. Well, it's the projects, all right? But the projects we learn a lot from are the ones that are significant. They may be significant to the employee personally, they really care about it. It's a feature that they are passionate about, but it's important to the team, to the company. They feel like they need to come through. They're motivated, they're paying careful attention. It's not something they're tossing off in their sleep. They have to make decisions, real judgment calls, real design decisions. Otherwise, if you're just painting by numbers, not a learning opportunity. And it certainly helps. The best projects that we learn the most from are the ones that have real usage, real jeopardy, real consequences. And that has to do with the next step, which is learning from it. If there aren't real consequences, very hard to learn from what you did. And so we need, not just to do work, we need the opportunity to learn from that work. And the projects where we did it for a long time and then it ends up on the shelf gathering dust, it's hard to learn from those because we don't get data. We don't know if it was buggy. We don't know if it's going to fall over under heavy load. Another thing you can do to spin up those stairs faster is to give people help interpreting the data. There's definitely sort of the sink or swim model. All of us probably have been in that position as managers where there's sort of no one around us telling us how to manage, so we're just kind of trial and erroring it. But if you are around people, if you're around mentors who actually have seen this movie before, you can't really help somebody grow by just telling them what to do. They kind of have to experience it for themselves. But you can help them by helping them digest what they learned, by interpreting what they learned. And that feedback can come from you as their boss, but you're not the only possibility. Peers, mentors, cross-function engineer can learn from a product manager, from someone in QA or design. All right, so let's talk about the life cycle of engineers and put this kind of meta framework about growth, let's apply it to people at different stages of their careers. So people, when they're straight out of college, straight out of boot camp, brand new engineer, they kind of cake as far as developing their careers go. It's a little bit like tomato seeds. You can sort of toss them in the ground and boom, you get a lot of fruit. But nonetheless, there are still things that you can do to accelerate people at the very beginnings of their careers and help them grow, not just fast, but really fast. Number one, the more often you ship, the faster you learn. When new grads ask me, where should I go to work after college? Should I go to a big company or a small company? I say size of company is not actually the interesting dimension. The interesting dimension is how often are you going to ship? All else being equal, you are going to learn a lot more from working on a web stack where you are shipping to users every week than you will on a mobile app where you are shipping once a month or twice or every 2 months. And you will certainly learn faster than if you're working on an operating system that ships once a year. And you don't have the choice of what, like you probably work on one of those things or something. And you may or may not be able to sort of speed up the release cycle. But know that, especially for people new in their careers, the faster they ship, the faster a ship cycle you can put them on, the more feedback loops quickly you can give them, the faster they will learn. It also, of course, helps to have teammates who can and will teach them. I always tell new grads to look for the quality of the team they're going to work with. And you just want to expose these guys to lots of new things. So, if you first give them, some JavaScript work, then give them some backend work, then maybe try them on, some data stuff. Giving them a mix of things will increase their capacity very rapidly. And if you do this right, the new engineers in your team can double or triple their capacity every year for the first 2 or 3 years. And I've seen this firsthand, and it's just like a superpower. It's a supercharge for your team. But then something happens, all right? So we get these people, they're new, they're sort of apprenticing, they're kind of learning things. First they get bug fixes, then they get features, and then they become kind of these mature, polished, I'll call them senior software engineers. And here I'm gonna start using vocabulary that's conflating a little bit the career ladder, the promotion framework with personal growth. And I'm doing that because it just, I only have 20 minutes and I don't want to say, that level of responsibility where you can competently own a feature end to end and lead 2 or 3 other engineers. I'm just going to call that senior software engineer, for better or worse. Not because the promotion is the end in itself or the title is the end in itself, but because actually what those career frameworks are is an analog to digital framework that is trying to competently reflect the reality of personal growth. So and actually as a manager, our jobs are to try to make those frameworks have integrity. And so let's talk about that senior software engineer. So you've gotten someone to that level of competence of ownership. They can really fire and forget, we call them, give them a feature, give them 2 other engineers, they go. Let's call this mid-career or senior software engineer. At every company I've worked for and every company I've seen, the vast majority of engineers, 80 to 85%, sometimes 90%, are at this level or lower, somewhere between junior and mid-career. And the number of engineers who reach the next level, that kind of staff level, tech lead, build a start. All right, a staff level is a person who can own a whole product. It's someone that you would build a team or a startup around, okay? And so let's just call that the staff level. Again, shorthand, not saying promotion frameworks are the end in of themselves, but good vocabulary. All right, very few engineers seem to fetch up at the staff level. And most managers I know believe that that is inevitable. And that's a mistake. We believe that staff engineers are born and not made. We believe that if somebody has the innate potential to be that kind of a leader, they are just going to drive themselves there. And as managers, it's not our job to get them there. We may not even know how to get them there. We may or may not quite be at the staff level ourselves, because if we're managing teams of 5 or fewer people, we're probably at that senior level. And it's sort of somewhere around the, I'm managing 10 people, I could take on a whole product, that's when we hit the staff level. But it is not, in fact, inevitable. And it took me lots of years to shake off this preconception, but what did it was just it was actually just time and service. It was actually just watching over a lifetime the people I knew at the outset people I thought had great potential, seeing who made it, who didn't, and under what circumstances they made it. And I think it had a lot more to do with the environment they were in. It had to do with their innate potential and their ethic, their work ethic, but it also had to do with the environment they were in. The typical problems, why it becomes hard to find the next riser, the next step on that staircase once you reach that senior software engineer level. One is that most projects your team is doing, if a staff level project is one that is the scope of 10 or more people, it's the scope of a startup, of our product end to end, if you're sitting inside a team, most of the projects that team has are now in your comfort zone. It's actually hard to find a project that's in your stress zone, that's a lift out. The other nature of this change is that the role itself changes, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And last but not least, mentorship becomes harder to find. When you're junior rising to senior, everybody around you is, when you're brand new, everybody around you is a role model and a potential guide. The more you advance, the more everybody around you is a peer, and it's harder to find guidance and feedback loops that help you. So let's talk about those staff level projects. They are scarce. Generally, if you're leading a team, how many of you are leading a team of 10 or more people? Okay, and how many is smaller than 10? 9 or fewer? About half and half. All right, so if your team is of 10 or more, like your whole team's existence is like one staff level project. And so the people in your team don't necessarily all have access to that project. That project is being tech lead of the team. And so if you look at someone in your team and they are competent and they're really great at owning things, they're fire and forget, and you think this person could take the next step, I wonder what will break them through. Your job, the manager intervention for you, is not to sort of sit back and wait for them to find a project. It is to help them find a project. And where do you find them? Well, first of all, your team may have one, if it's big enough, and if you are working on new stuff, so give it to them. That works for one engineer in your team. Another possibility is to invent one. Can you and this engineer, can you and your team together, with your product manager, your designer, can you collectively invent a new large-scale initiative that could come out of your team? By the way, this is awesome for your career too. And can you get approval to work on it? Maybe not. Your team is already full. Your job is already at maximum complexity. All right, this third one hurts, but think about it from the perspective of your CEO. There may be a project in another team that has no one with the potential to tackle it, and you may have an engineer in your team who has the potential that's being squandered because you don't have a project for them. You can matchmake them to that project. The global productivity of your organization and your company is better off. If you were the CEO of your company, if you were VP of engineering, you should want that match to be made. And by the way, that great, competent engineer in your team, like it's really hard to part with that person. But sometimes when they move out, that creates a vacuum that enables other people in your team to grow. There is a consolation prize for this. And ultimately, if you're doing right by the company and you're doing right by the employee, you should be prepared to take one for the team. Last but not least, sometimes these staff level projects don't exist already in the context of one team or another. It's a brand new initiative. It's a brand new vertical we're opening, a new geography. Maybe we've acquired a company and we need someone to go in and help assimilate them. And I will tell you what happens at larger companies. If you're in the sub 50 person company, you're probably in that conversation. But at the larger company, what happens is some directors or VPs are huddling in a back room and they're like, oh shit, we got this big important project. Somebody's got to lead it. Who can do it? We already don't have enough staff engineers. We already don't have enough people with the capacity to take on this kind of responsibility. And they're all tied up on the most important priorities of the company. So who's next in the queue? Who's in line? And you're not going to be in that room. But your job as a manager is to make sure that somebody who is going to be in that room knows that Mary on your team is ready to take that step. And if they don't have an obvious candidate, they should bet on her. And so I'd like to point out a feature that all 4 items on this list share, which is that in order for somebody to get that big scope of responsibility project, the big bet stretch project that grows you and that grows an engineer, that grows their career, it takes either sponsorship from management or leadership, or it takes just sheer dumb luck that you're standing there and the anvil falls on you and nobody else is around, or it takes a lot of personal social capital and internal recognition. And I think this is actually sort of one of the least fair things about the promotion process, which is that people don't get opportunity to grow in accordance with their potential. They get it in accordance to where they happen to be standing. And you, as a manager, can make a huge difference in that by sponsoring the people in your team and not leaving it up to chance. But you should also kind of feel like, hey, wait, then like maybe the people in my team are really lucky and the people in other teams, you know, and they get to grow, but people in other teams don't. Like, is that fair either? Well, first of all, that's a competitive advantage for you as a manager, so do it. Like, it's not helping anybody else for you to hold your team back. But second of all, I will give you a quick sidebar on, all right, if you are at a small company, if you are even at a larger company, if you're in a position to sort of talk to engineering leadership, this should be one of if you are Michael Lopp and you're the VPE of Slack, this should actually be one of your largest concerns, which is how do I design an organization that is growing everyone? And so what are the organizational design kind of things you could do to make a system that was resilient and that actually distributed opportunities much more fairly? And here's a few of those things, right? Which is to sort of identify and flag growth projects as they come along, be really systematic about who's getting assigned, have visibility of those projects broadly available. It's easier for someone to put up their hand for a project if they know it exists. Having low barriers to team transfers, so those managers who aren't sponsoring their people, like, kind of lose them. And having low barriers to kicking off new ideas. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm not going to go super deep on these, but I will just leave these seeds out there for you if you want to think about not just how to develop your own team, but how your organization can make a better environment for development. All right, so projects are a huge part of the equation, but they are not all of it. When you are owning a feature end-to-end, rewriting a back-end, it's you, it's maybe a couple other engineers, your technical skill and your personal productivity are largely what drive that success. That's what propelled your engineer to senior software engineer. Now you're dealing with much larger problems. It's the scope of a larger team of people, and suddenly your productivity is maxed out at your typing speed. And you cannot apply your awesome technical knowledge across a wider scope unless you can convey it to other engineers, to other people. And so for engineers whose technical skill and productivity has propelled them all this way to senior, sometimes what stops them from making the jump to staff is not that they don't have a project like that available, but they cannot summon the soft skills, the leadership and teamwork skills to tackle a problem of that magnitude. And so before it was their strengths propelling them forward, and it's sort of hard for them to make that pivot of what got me here is not going to get me to the next step. And here as well, yes, to some managers this is more obvious and they make that sharp left turn on their own, but you as a manager can also intervene. Presumably the soft skills are a little more apparent to you. You've got some facility with them because that's what got you yanked into a manager position in the first place. You may or may not be able to give your killer senior software engineer great, technical advice. They may now be beyond you on the technology, but you can absolutely give them the soft skills advice of how to lead a team, of how to coalesce a group, of how to tackle a big project. You can stand back and make space for them to do project management one-on-ones. Those are all things that, may need like a more calculated coaching and teaching model from you, but that people are capable of learning. This isn't rocket science. It's not like you're either born knowing soft skills or you're not. It's learnable. Actually, rocket science is learnable too. All right, last but not least, it's hard to find role models. It's hard to find mentors at this level. There just may not be one in your team or your vicinity. And again, it was sort of organically present in the water up until this level, and now all of a sudden there's sort of a vacuum. Well, you as a manager can also help here. You may or may not be that guy. You probably are no longer the role model or the mentor for the jump from senior to staff, maybe on soft skills, but maybe not on technology. But you can absolutely matchmake them. You are standing in a position where you have visibility into lots of other teams. If yours is a company where titles are private or level is private, like you may know who the staff engineers are when your engineer doesn't, you can matchmake. You can set up a relationship. It doesn't need to be in your team. In fact, sometimes it's virtuous if it's not. It doesn't necessarily even need to be in your company. And so again, this is totally under your control, and it helps people's careers do this. I don't want to neglect the existence of the luminary level or sort of the executive level individual contributor. These are the IBM fellows, the principal engineers. I'll call them luminaries. You may not ever have one in your team. They're rare. And I don't know. I firmly believe that most engineers can make it to staff if they're exposed to the right conditions. I don't know if that is or is not true about luminaries, but if we come across them, we certainly owe it to the world to try to foster them. And what do? They originate ideas, they solve the company's hardest problems, they're having industry-wide impact. They're able to think at every level, at the highest, way up at the 30,000 foot level and like way down at the sort of micro level. And I've been lucky enough to work with a number of these individuals, and so those are just my observations, my recognition from what I've seen they have in common. What it takes, like, I don't have firm answers here, but like, I don't think hard work and excellence are enough. I think there was a certain degree of vision to achieve this kind of scope of impact. I think probably there is some element of luck, as there is in so much of being in the right place at the right time. But I think all the luminaries I've met have a larger motivation. You know, I think when we get our start post-college, a lot of us are really focused on ourselves. And then as we start to feel comfortable and confident, we get more motivated about our team. And then as we start having more and more scope of responsibility, it suddenly dawns on us, this is probably dawning on all of you right now, hey, I can affect the outcome for my company. You know, I can be the go-to guy for this thing that is mission critical. And I think luminaries have maybe gone beyond the company level to the industry and the world. And I would say, what can you do to help if you have a potential luminary on your team? Matchmake them with peers and with problems. And most of all, it can be intimidating to have someone like this around you. You may think, gosh, what value do I have to offer them? Your impulse may be to gatekeep, like maybe I have special information. And so if I sort of hoard information, they can need to come to me for that. Resist that impulse, don't gatekeep. They will value you for not gatekeeping them. And again, you'll get value for exposing other people to them. I haven't talked about how to develop people into managers. That's because very often those who are managers are quick to spot and groom potential in managers. And so you don't need as much of, I think most people don't need as much coaching on how to do it. A lot of times these openings or projects are created naturally because when we're hiring tons of engineers, it's sort of like, you know, there's no question that more managers are needed. That's why so many of us have stories about battlefield promotions. But I will say that if you're worried about your own career development, the only way for you to rise is if you have, it may feel like, hey, I've just become a manager, it's early to think about making people in my team into managers, but the only way for you to rise, the only way for you to tackle larger and larger scope of responsibility, you know, just as the engineer taps out on his typing speed, you will tap out on your one-on-one bandwidth, and the only way for you to rise and tackle more and more scope of responsibility is to have managers working with you. All right, so I want to make this really grounded and give you something to do on Monday. Let's talk about how to go back to your office and do an inventory of your team. First things first is to identify whether they are active or passive in their career growth. And the point of this bell curve, I believe that, you know, at the extremes, very few people are active about their own careers. Some people are, that's the person in your office asking, you know, where their next promotion is or what the next project is. Those people are actively growing. And chances are, like, it's pretty easy to work with them on that because they're proactively digging it out of you. And there may be some people at the other end who are actively not growing, who are happy with where they are and they are content and they are doing good work and they are productive, you know, and maybe once in a while they get a great bonus for being, you know, for solving a hard problem, but, you know, they probably are, you know, they are what they are and you're happy with it or you're not, but they're happy. But the vast majority of your team is probably passive, which may be hard to see because some of them are growing and some of them are stuck. But their passivity means it's up to luck or the conditions of the environment, not how much potential they have, that they happen to be growing or not growing. And so your job as a manager is actually to inventory their potential and then to go prod the passive ones into action. So how do you inventory potential? How do you think about what is the potential of each of my engineers to grow and what do I do to activate that potential? Well, it turns out it's really hard to be intellectually honest about potential because we love everybody. We want to be unfailingly kind. And so we want to say everybody is a special, beautiful snowflake, and everybody's going to go far. But I don't know exactly how to get them from there to here. So I have another hack for you, which is to trick yourself, to elicit what's going on in your gut with a different question. And that is, when am I next going to promote them? And so your choices for each person on your team, just ask yourself, when do I next think this person should be up for promotion? And if it's sort of 0 to 12 months, that is in the next promotion cycle, you really probably mean they're already there. And if you think it's 1 to 3 years, then you definitely believe they have potential. That means you don't have a clear plan, you don't exactly know what you need to do to get them to the next level, but you think the potential exists. If you look at them and you come up with, I don't really see it in the next 3 years, in this line of work, 3 years is the time horizon of forever. So if you can't see promoting them in the next 3 years, what you really mean is you don't believe they have potential to grow to the next level. All right, so what do you do once you've bucketed people in these categories? For that person who you know they're up for it at the next cycle, you're already doing it. They're already on the right project, they're already fixing the soft skills, you just need to keep giving feedback, refine, polish the tough edges, make sure you're listening to what other peers have to say about it. But they're on the track, they are growing, you're probably and it's just a matter of time until you're able to recognize it. When you said 1 to 3 years, what you mean is, I think this person has the potential, but I'm not doing anything about it. And this is the critical group where this is the moment where you can intervene. And your job is at your next one-on-one with this person to sit down, to activate them if they're passive, to talk about what they want to accomplish, and to start brainstorming about where their next stretch project is going to come from. And if they need feedback or mentors, like to identify what that gap is and apply it. For those people in the never bucket, you need to actually make a decision. If they are content, if they're happy with where they are and you're happy with where they are, maybe it's fine. If they're content but you actually think, gosh, I don't want someone not progressing in my team, then you need to level with them. You need to try to get them uncontent. You need to try to get them activated. But if they want to grow and you think, gosh, they really don't have what it takes, you also need to be transparent with people about that, even though it's a hard conversation. Because they actually they're never going to grow if you don't believe in their growth in your team. And they deserve a chance to leave your team and find someone who will help them grow. Or to find a different environment or opportunity or context in which they could grow, because maybe it's not in the dimension that your team and your company has available. And so sort of sitting on those and avoiding them is not doing you a service, it's not doing the employee a service. And you're better off filling that gap with someone who is going to grow. If you are not content. That's why I say needs decision, not get rid of. All right, so go back on Monday. Inventory your team, meet people where they're at. If they're passive, they're active, you've got to understand what they want. You deliver an opportunity, they rise to the occasion, everybody wins, no underpants required. That's it.